Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what is unfolding in Istanbul right now demands directness. What we are witnessing is not a routine safety drill. It is not standard earthquake preparedness. What we are witnessing is the largest peacetime civilian evacuation in Turkish history, and it is happening right now, today, while most of the world is not paying attention. I am looking at satellite imagery that has been circulating among European disaster response agencies for the past 48 hours. What it shows is not chaos. It is not panic. What it shows is 75,000 people moving in coordinated waves out of specific neighborhoods in Istanbul. Neighborhoods that sit directly above what seismologists are now calling the most dangerous fault line currently active on Earth. This is not speculation. This is not fear-mongering. This is Turkish civil defense implementing evacuation protocols that were written after the 1999 Marmara earthquake killed 17,000 people. Protocols they swore they would never have to use. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why Turkey's government made this decision, why the seismic data they are seeing is different from anything recorded in the past century, and why what happens in Istanbul in the next 72 hours will determine whether we are looking at a humanitarian crisis or a catastrophe that reshapes the entire Eastern Mediterranean. This is the Daily Brief. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively monitored by disaster response agencies across 3 continents. Let's start with the geography, because the North Anatolian Fault matters in ways most people do not fully understand. The fault runs approximately 1,500 kilometers across northern Turkey, from the Karlıyova Triple Junction in the east, all the way to the Aegean Sea in the west. It is a strike-slip fault, meaning the Anatolian Plate and the Eurasian Plate are sliding past each other horizontally at a rate of approximately 20 to 25 millimeters per year. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the same slip rate as the San Andreas Fault in California, but the North Anatolian Fault runs directly beneath one of the largest metropolitan areas on Earth. Istanbul, with a population of 16 million people, sits astride the fault's western terminus. The Marmara segment of the fault, the section directly beneath the Sea of Marmara and the southern neighborhoods of Istanbul, has not experienced a major rupture since 1766. That is 260 years of accumulated tectonic stress. According to research published by the Kandilli Observatory and Earthquake Research Institute, the Marmara segment has the potential to generate a magnitude 7.4 earthquake, possibly larger. When you have 16 million people living directly above a fault that has been locked for 2.5 centuries, you do not have a disaster scenario. You have a civilizational threat. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now, let's talk about what Turkish seismologists actually detected that triggered this evacuation. Announcement number 1, the microseismic swarm. And this one matters more than anything else because it represents a pattern seismologists have been dreading for decades. Between March 17th and March 22nd, the Kandilli Observatory recorded 1,247 micro-earthquakes along the Marmara segment. Not scattered tremors, not random background noise. A concentrated swarm of seismic events, all magnitude 2.5 or below, all occurring within a 12-kilometer radius beneath the Prince's Islands, just off the coast of Istanbul. Dr. Naci Görür, one of Turkey's most respected geologists and former head of the Istanbul Technical University's Geology Department, described the swarm in an interview with Hurriyet Daily News as, and I am quoting him directly here, a textbook precursor pattern consistent with fault creep and fluid migration in the hours to days before a major rupture event. That is not alarmist language. That is a scientist with 50 years of experience telling you that the fault is moving in ways it has not moved in living memory. According to reporting by Reuters and confirmed by the Turkish Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, seismic monitoring stations detected a measurable increase in ground deformation. GPS stations on both sides of the fault recorded horizontal displacement of 4.3 millimeters over a 72-hour period. In geological terms, that is catastrophically fast movement. The fault is not locked anymore, it is sliding. And when a fault that has been locked for 260 years begins to slide, what comes next is not a question of if, but when. Received. That is announcement number one. Announcement number two, the radon gas anomaly. This is the part that European disaster agencies have confirmed, but most media outlets are not reporting. Between March 18th and March 21st, radon detectors positioned along the fault line recorded gas concentration levels exceeding 400 becquerels per cubic meter. Normal background levels in Istanbul range between 50 and 100 becquerels per cubic meter. When you see a 400% spike in radon emissions along an active fault, you are seeing gases escaping from deep crustal fractures. The fault is opening. The pressure is releasing. And historically, radon spikes of this magnitude precede major seismic events by anywhere from 48 hours to 2 weeks. Dr. Shukru Ersoy, a geophysicist at Yildiz Technical University, has stated publicly that radon monitoring has successfully predicted earthquakes in Japan, China, and Italy with a 70 to 80% accuracy rate when combined with other precursor signals. Turkey has been deploying radon detectors along the North Anatolian Fault since 2011, specifically for this purpose. The fact that they are acting on the data now tells you everything you need to know about how seriously they are taking these readings. Stay with me, because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the scale of what Turkey is attempting becomes impossible to ignore. Announcement number 3, the evacuation zones. And this one, almost nobody in the international media is connecting correctly. The 75,000 people being evacuated are not coming from random neighborhoods. They are coming from Avcılar, Bakırköy, and Küçükçekmece, 3 districts on Istanbul's European side that were devastated in the 1999 earthquake. These are the districts where apartment buildings collapsed. These are the districts where rescue teams pulled bodies from rubble for 11 straight days. And these are the districts where soil liquefaction, the process by which saturated soil loses structural integrity during seismic shaking, turned solid ground into quicksand. According to a 2019 study published in the journal Soil Dynamics and Earthquake Engineering, approximately 40% of Istanbul's building stock does not meet current seismic codes. That is 6.4 million people living in structures that would not survive a magnitude 7 earthquake. The Turkish government knows this, engineers know this, and the reason they are evacuating these specific 75,000 people from these specific neighborhoods is because geological surveys have identified these zones as having the highest liquefaction risk in the entire metropolitan area. If the Marmara segment ruptures, these neighborhoods will not just shake, they will sink. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the official government statements, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the international media is only covering one of them. The official narrative is precautionary evacuation based on heightened seismic risk. The reality is that Turkey's government is conducting the largest test of its disaster response infrastructure since the 1999 earthquake exposed catastrophic failures in emergency management, building codes, and interagency coordination. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has staked significant political capital on Turkey's earthquake preparedness. After the February 2023 earthquakes in Kahramanmaraş killed more than 50,000 people, and exposed widespread corruption in building inspections, Erdogan promised a complete overhaul of Turkey's disaster response systems. This evacuation is that promise being tested in real time. If it succeeds, Turkey demonstrates it has learned from past failures. If it fails, if logistics break down, if evacuees cannot be housed, if panic spreads faster than official information, the political consequences will be severe. Think carefully about what this represents. When a government evacuates 75,000 people from a major city based on seismic precursor data, that is not ambiguity. That is not an abundance of caution. That is a verdict. They believe the earthquake is coming, and they believe it is coming soon. And here is what most analysts are missing. The economic implications are already materializing. Istanbul is Turkey's economic engine, generating approximately 30% of the country's GDP. The Istanbul Stock Exchange has dropped 4.7% since the evacuation announcement. The Turkish lira has weakened against the dollar. Foreign investors are pulling capital out of Turkish bonds. Insurance companies are re-evaluating earthquake coverage policies. This is not just a natural disaster threat. This is an economic stability threat. And the longer the evacuation continues, the more damage it does to investor confidence, tourism revenue, and Istanbul's status as a regional financial hub. If you own property in Istanbul, what is happening along the Marmara segment is not a geology story. It is an asset valuation story. If you operate a business dependent on Turkish supply chains, it is a logistics continuity story. And if you are watching natural gas prices in Europe, it is an energy security story, because Turkey controls the Bosphorus Strait, through which 40,000 ships pass every year, including tankers carrying Russian and Caspian oil and gas to European markets. A major earthquake in Istanbul does not just threaten 16 million Turkish citizens. It threatens energy flows, maritime trade routes, and economic stability across the entire region. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake killed 3,000 people and destroyed 80% of the city. But what most people forget is that the earthquake triggered a financial panic that contributed to the 1907 banking crisis in the United States. The Lisbon earthquake of 1755 killed between 30 and 50,000 people, destroyed the Portuguese capital, and effectively ended Portugal's status as a global colonial power. An earthquake is never just an earthquake when it strikes a critical node in the global economic and political system. Istanbul in 2026 is what Lisbon was in 1755. It is the hinge point between Europe and Asia. It is the city where East meets West, where Christian Europe traded with the Islamic world for centuries, where the Silk Road terminated and the Mediterranean began. If Istanbul falls, the geopolitical and economic reverberations will be felt from Berlin to Beijing. And Turkey's government understands this, which is why they are not waiting for the earthquake to happen. They are acting on the precursor data now, before the rupture, before the death toll, before the collapse. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1. The earthquake does not materialize within the next 2 weeks. Seismic precursors are notoriously unreliable. Radon spikes, microseismic swarms, and ground deformation can occur without resulting in a major rupture. In this scenario, Turkey's government will face criticism for causing unnecessary panic, economic disruption, and evacuation costs. But they will have successfully tested their disaster response systems, identified logistical weaknesses, and demonstrated that they are willing to act decisively on scientific data. The political cost is manageable. The precedent is valuable. Path 2. A moderate earthquake occurs, magnitude 6.0 to 6.5, causing significant damage but not catastrophic collapse. Buildings shake, some older structures fail, casualties number in the hundreds rather than thousands. In this scenario, the evacuation saves lives, validates the government's decision, and strengthens public trust in Turkey's disaster response capabilities. Erdogan's administration benefits politically. International aid flows in. Reconstruction begins quickly. This is the best realistic outcome. Path 3, the worst-case scenario. A magnitude 7.4 or greater earthquake ruptures the entire Marmara segment. 16 million people experience violent shaking for 60 to 90 seconds. Older buildings collapse. Soil liquefaction swallows entire neighborhoods. The death toll reaches into the tens of thousands. And because 75,000 people were evacuated from the highest risk zones, the government can credibly claim they minimize casualties. But the economic, political, and humanitarian consequences will still be catastrophic. Turkey will need years to recover. The Bosphorus will be disrupted. Energy markets will panic, and the Middle East will lose one of its most important stabilizing powers. I think we are closer to path 2 than the headlines suggest. The data is concerning, but not apocalyptic. Turkish seismologists are being appropriately cautious, and the government is acting on the best available science. But the uncertainty is real, the threat is real, and the next 72 hours will be critical. Here are the questions I want you to take away. Are other countries with major cities on active fault lines watching how Turkey handles this? Is this the future of earthquake preparedness, where evacuations happen before the disaster rather than after? And if the earthquake does not come, will governments become more hesitant to act on precursor data in the future, potentially leading to greater casualties when the next real threat emerges? Tell me in the comments what you think Turkey's government should do if the earthquake does not materialize within 2 weeks. Tell me if you think precautionary evacuations set a good precedent or create a dangerous expectation that governments will always be able to predict disasters. We will keep tracking every development along the North Anatolian Fault, every seismic reading, every government decision. That is what the Daily Brief does every single day. Subscribe now, share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is really happening in Istanbul. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next briefing.